All right, so here's a video for note 6-3, which is one variable inequalities. So an inequality is a symbol such as the ones here that represent either being less than or greater than a certain amount. So what we're used to seeing is equality, which is an equal sign, which means that one quantity is equal to another. But when we have a symbol starting with the one on the upper left, this symbol means less than. When it's pointing to the right, this symbol means greater than. And the way that you can kind of remember it is the less than symbol, if you can make it with your left hand, that's how you can remember it. It's a less than. Okay, and then the symbol directly to the right, this is less than or equal to. So when we have that line underneath, that means we include that number. So less than or equal to, and the symbol right below it, that's going to be greater than or equal to. So in this lesson, we're going to learn how to graph inequalities. So when we're graphing inequalities, we're going to be either using open circles or closed circles. An open circle means that it does not include that point, so it does not include. And a closed circle means it includes that number. And this will make more sense when we graph one. Okay, and we're also in this lesson going to learn how to solve a one variable inequality. And one thing that we have to remember when we're working with inequalities is if we multiply or divide by a negative number, you must flip the sign of the inequality, meaning you have to reverse it. So if it was less than, it becomes greater than. And that has to do with the fact that when we multiply or divide by a negative number, we switch the sign of the number that we're multiplying or dividing by. We're going to see this happen in example 3. So I'm just going to write C, example 3. All right, so now let's graph the inequality. So starting with number 1, so it's might be a good idea to write out what this inequality says. So it says x is less than 4. So x is less than 4. So we're used to seeing equalities. If we say x equals 4, then that means x has to be 4. But this is basically telling me that x can be any number that is less than 4. So to visually represent that solution, we're going to use a number line. So I'm going to place 4. It doesn't matter where you put it. I'm just going to put it somewhere in the middle. And then we can fill in the numbers to the left and to the right. So this is 3, 2, 1. I'm just going to go 3 to the left and 3 to the right. So 5, 6, 7. Obviously, we would continue on if we needed to. So if we wanted to graph this solution, so less than 4 means it doesn't include 4, which means that we're going to use an open circle. And less than would be to the left. So this solution, represented graphically, would look like this. X is less than 4, meaning the solution can be any number from 4, not including 4, and below. Sometimes we put this actually on the number line as well. I'm just putting it above it just so it's easier to see. So one thing you can also, that might help you, is that the arrowhead is going to be in the same direction as whatever the inequality is, as long as your X is on the left-hand side. So if we look at number 2, if you notice, it's kind of flipped. So usually we're used to seeing x on the left-hand side. So what we can actually do is we can actually flip this around so x is on the left-hand side. So if we were to do that, you can think of it as kind of turning it upside down. If we swap x to the left-hand side, it would be x is greater than or equal to 6, because you can kind of think of it as rotating at 180 degrees. So in this case, this written out in words would be x is greater than or equal to 6. Okay, so let's graphically represent that on this number line. So I'm going to put 6 in the middle, and I'm just going to write some numbers to the right and to the left. So 7, 8, 9, 6, 5, 4, 3. And then to graph this, since it's greater than or equal to, that means we're going to include 6 in our solution. So that means I'm going to use a closed circle. And since it's greater than or equal to, that means our arrow is going to go to the right. So again, something that might help you is if we look at our arrowhead, that should be pointing in the same direction as our inequality if x is written on the left-hand side. Okay, so now we should be able to practice, given an inequality, we should be able to write what it is. So in this case, we know that x has to be the number that we're talking about. And then if we look, we see that our dot is at 11. So I'm going to put 11 here. The arrow is pointing to the left. My arrowhead is going in this direction, so that means we're going to use a less than symbol. And since we have a closed circle, we're going to use a line underneath. So this would be the graph for x is less than or equal to 11. All right, so this one, x, and then the number that we're going to use is 4, since that's where the circle's at. We're going to the right, and our arrowhead is pointing to the right, which means that we are going to be a greater than symbol. And then since we have an open circle, we're not going to include the line underneath because we know that our solution does not include 4. So this graph is for the inequality x is greater than 4. All right, this one, our dot is at -1. And our arrowhead is going to the left, which means that we're going to use a less than symbol. In this case, we have an open circle, which means we are not going to put the line underneath. It does not include -1. So our solution, this is the inequality, x is less than -1. All right, so this one is a little bit of a challenge problem because if you notice, this isn't a graph on a number line. This is actually a graph on a coordinate plane. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to write the equation of this line. We'll get more into this next week when we do a later lesson. But if we look here, we're going to write the equation of the line. And if we write the equation of the line, we need the y-intercept, which is at 4. So I know I'm going to add 4. And now we need to figure out my slope. So for my slope, I'm just going to find another point on the line. We go down 2, and we go right 3. So that means my slope is going to be -2/3. Okay, however, we know that this is an inequality. Okay, so we know that we can't use an equal sign in this case. So, sorry, I'm just trying to erase the equal sign. What we're going to learn is that when we have a solid line, that means it includes all the solutions on that line, which means that we are going to have a symbol on the line on the bottom of our inequality. And in this case, we have to think, well, look, the part that is shaded is everything below the line or everything less than the line. So this inequality would actually be y is less than or equal to -2/3 x plus 4. All right, the last part of this lesson is now kind of putting together what we learned in the previous couple lessons of solving equations, and now we're going to learn how to solve and graph inequalities. So the one thing that we do have to remember when solving an inequality, the only thing that's different from solving an equation is when we solve an inequality, if we multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality, because remember, that's flipping the sign of the number that you are dividing by. So we're going to go through and solve this like we normally would. So I'm going to draw a line down, and we're solving for x, so we need to get rid of the -3, the multiply by -3, and the subtract 2. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to undo the subtract 2 by adding 2. So then I have -3x is greater than 9. And then from here, we need to get rid of the multiply by -3, so we're going to divide by -3. And in this case, since we divided by a negative, we're going to flip the inequality. And we're going to flip it because we divided by a negative. Okay, so now we have x by itself, and since we're dividing by a negative, we're going to flip the symbol to be a less than symbol, and 9 divided by -3 is going to be -3. So now I'm going to go ahead and graph. So I'm going to put -3 somewhere in the middle. I'm just going to write the numbers to the right and to the left. So -2, -1, 0, and -4, -5, -6. And then we're going to go ahead and plot this. So x equals -3. We are not including -3, so I'm going to put an open circle. And it's less than, so we're going to go to the left. And again, one way to remember which direction the arrowhead on your line should be in the same direction as the inequality symbol as long as your variable's on the left-hand side.